Hello, everyone. My name is Lori Peak, and I am the director of the Natural Hazard Center here at the University of Colorado Boulder. On behalf of everyone here at the Natural Hazard Center, we wanted to wish you all a happy new year. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the 2020 Making Mitigation Work webinar series, which is hosted by the Natural Hazard Center and made possible with the support of the Federal Emergency Management Agency and the National Science Foundation. This webinar series highlights recent progress in mitigation policy, practice, and research. We are so grateful that you have joined us today. Before we begin the webinar presentation, please know that this forum is being recorded. The captioned webinar video and the presentation slides will be posted online at the Natural Hazards website at hazards.colorado.edu. This is also where you can find the recordings and supplemental materials from prior Making Mitigation Work webinars from 2019. We also wanted to remind all webinar participants that thanks to a partnership with the International Association of Emergency Managers, we are now offering one contact hour of emergency management training through the IAEM certification program. To receive the credit, you are required to attend for the entire session. Please visit the Making Mitigation Work webpage under the Trainings tab at hazards.colorado.edu and contact Katie Murphy for more information on receiving your certificate for attending this webinar today. Katie's email address is on the current slide and the webinar website for Making Mitigation Work. And as always, thank you so much to Katie for all of the work that goes into coordinating these webinars and also to ensuring that all of you get your certificate for your emergency management training. If at any point during the presentation that you will hear today, you have questions or comments, you can offer those either via the chat function or the Q&A box on Zoom. You can set the chat function so only the presenters and administrators for this webinar see your comments, or you can set it so everyone on the webinar sees your question. Our speakers will respond to questions as time permits during the webinar. For those questions we are unable to get to today, we will share written responses via the Making Mitigation Work webinar page. Today, during this webinar, there will be 3 poll questions for those of you who have downloaded the Zoom application. These will be launched during various times throughout the presentation, and you will be prompted to answer when the question appears on your screen. Unfortunately, if you are in a browser view of this webinar, Zoom limits your experience and you can't answer the polling questions. So if you need to download the application, now is the time. Now, without further ado, I would like to introduce you to our esteemed speakers for today's webinar. Leslie Chapman Henderson is President and CEO of the Federal Alliance for Safe Homes, also widely known as FLASH. John Ingargiola is a lead physical scientist in the Building Sciences branch at the Federal Emergency Management Agency, also widely known as FEMA. I have heard Leslie and John speak at prior events, but I have never heard them present together. I think we are definitely in for a treat today as they share with us more information about the newly released No Code, No Confidence campaign. Leslie and John, thank you so much for taking the time to join with us today. We are going to go ahead and turn the slide presentation capabilities over to you now. And as we do that, I hope that our webinar participants will join us in offering a warm virtual welcome. Leslie, over to you.
Okay, thank you so much, Lori. We're going to go ahead and start our screen share.
And I stopped sharing mine, Leslie, so hopefully you can share yours now.
All righty, let's see.
Wonderful, I can see your slides. Good, thank you.
This is, okay, And I want to make sure you're seeing it in the full mode versus presentation. Did I get that right?
Leslie, we are seeing the presentation mode. So if you look at the bottom, there's a circle with 3 dots inside of the circle. If you click on that, then I think you can do the hide presenter mode.
Sorry about this. Oh my. Okay, so I'll start my share over. Okay. There you go. I lost my. Okay. Are you seeing the right one now?
So I am not seeing any slides right now, Leslie.
Okay.
I also have your slides here. I'm happy to share them if you'd like me to click through them, or what would be best for you. Do you want to try one more time with the share?
I think.
Oh, there we go. There we go.
Okay. How's that?
That's perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Sorry about that, guys. We practiced, and of course, it went perfectly. Okay, so let me get started by saying thank you for the opportunity to do this. We're very excited about this project and the collaboration and support of it, but once, as you know, you create something useful, the whole value is in getting it out to everybody. So that's what we're doing here today. I wanted to start by giving you just a little overview of what I'm gonna talk about. I'm gonna give you just a tiny perspective on how we see the disaster safety and resilience movement ourselves, and then a short but hopefully impactful take on this project and how we're using it to spread the message of building codes as a foundation for resilience. Our organization is the Federal Alliance for Safe Homes Flash. We're a nonprofit. This is our mission: strengthening homes and safeguarding families from disasters of all kinds. And just quick trouble check here. Are you seeing the slides advance?
Leslie, it's still on the main.
It's on the title.
Do you want to, it's still on the title slide. Do you want to click to the next one and I'll let you know if it advances?
I'm going to fix this right here and just switch to the other screen. Share this.
There it is.
Okay, and then that one, and you can see now my third slide in presentation view, I hope, correct?
It is not in slideshow mode, but I can see the second slide now.
Okay. This is crazy, guys. It's just not cooperating. Let me, give me one more second to get this to work properly, and I am just gonna try to stop the share. It's fighting me. Okay.
There we go. That's good. Thank you, Leslie.
Okay. I actually think you guys took back control.
Yeah, I'll run the slides for you. If,
okay. And the best laid plans of all of that. And the person who's helping me stepped out of the room thinking we were good to go too. Okay, so let's roll to that, get past this slide. Go ahead, Katie, and move past this slide. I've already covered this, and get to this third slide. Okay, so here we are. This is our mission: strengthening homes and safeguarding families from disasters of all kinds. And the way that we do that is we recognize that there's no one button we push to raise awareness of resilience and to help people understand what it takes to have a resilient building. Oh, if there were, how simple it would be. As we all know, that creating a strong built environment, the very core element of resilience, requires a lot of things to go well, and a lot of stakeholders and participants and users to be a part of the process and the chain of events that unfold to make things work. So we promote resilience from every angle, from helping people become aware that there is such a thing as resilience. We'll see a little bit of that in the research today, to understanding what the building blocks are. There's a persuasion element because of behavior change, and then ultimately they have to either accept or reject the use of, adoption of, or the embracing of the different components of resilience, like building codes. And so building codes are we're going to focus on today, but I want to give you one more slide if you want to go to the next one on the who we are. We have more than 100 partners. They span all different types of organizational construction, and we would welcome any of you on the webinar to join us in this work. We have had the same mission for 21 years. We are only as successful as the wonderful support of our partners and their collaboration with the information and everything else that goes with it. It is a truly public-private nonprofit array of organizations that make up what we call the Flash Partnership. So next slide. So let's talk about building codes, because when we first started out 21 years ago, building codes weren't what we were focused on, believe it or not. We thought that building codes were, we were like everyone else. We thought building codes were something that were already in place. What we were really going for in the beginning was beyond code mitigation and beyond code innovation for code future. But what we swiftly realized in our work is that building codes are not where they need to be, and that needed to be our starting point. I like using this picture to open up this conversation because it really tells the story of how critical building codes are. This is the coastline of Texas. It's an array of homes struck by Hurricane Harvey, and sometimes we forget that Harvey had a very significant wind aspect to the event as well. And you can look by the age of the homes, how the building performance almost correlates directly to the vintage of the building home used for construction. The blue home on the left that says 1970 did well, but that's because it was retrofitted in 2008 to, guess what, a more current model building code. So we really think this obviously tells the story, and I'm betting that most of the people on this webinar already understand that building codes are essential. Next slide. That being said, we aren't necessarily getting the benefit of building codes when you look at the accelerating costs of disaster. And again, I'm betting that many people on this webinar are very familiar with NOAA's billion-dollar disaster tabulations. Very, very helpful in helping policymakers and others understand that not only are we experiencing billion-dollar disasters, but we're experiencing them more frequently and with more intensity. And the bottom line is, not only do we not want these disasters and the human and societal impacts, we can't afford for this situation to go on unchecked. Next slide. FEMA, and John will probably talk about this a little bit more. And Katie, if you click it one more, I know I have an accentuation of this in here. Go back one, go back another, sorry. That's just a little highlight. FEMA has been taking a look at this and really drilling into the numbers. And so when we talk about there's challenges with building codes, one of the tools we now have in our toolkit is enhanced analysis of exactly where we are. And in the early iterations of this analysis, what we have learned is that we're not even halfway where we need to be with respect to building codes when you specifically drill into the idea of whether or not the hazard-resistant provisions are incorporated. And unfortunately, that means that we have even more work to do to advance our cause. So next slide. So that's where the project No Code, No Confidence, the initial working title was BCAP, Building Code Awareness Project, came together. 2 years ago, as we looked at the situation with building codes, we realized that we needed to create a means of A, understanding where we're starting in terms of public attitude, and B, providing solutions to help people understand building code transparency and where they may or may not be. Once we created the tool, we're now in the phase of extending the data set as well as creating national awareness of the tool. Next slide. So this is really what it boils down to. And at the end of the presentation, I'm going to show you where you can go. We have a dashboard. You will be able to download everything in the program, all of the creative assets, as well as the paper we wrote to kind of outline what we did with the survey and the research. But essentially the challenge is that 2 out of 3 places that are prone to severe weather don't have the building codes they need. Next slide. Now I'm only going to show you a couple of these, but as you can imagine, we could do several hours worth of discussion around the research findings. And we did the classic qualitative, quantitative approach. We got into focus groups in 3 cities. We talked to people after an initial phase with inside kind of the stakeholders. Then we talked to consumers. We got their impressions, and we used them as themes to fashion questions for quantitative analysis. So I have a very streamlined set of slides that kind of tell the story of what we found at every step along the way. And that's that most Americans in this analysis, 8 out of 10, were confident that they were at least moderately protected by their building codes. Next slide. And when we continued the discussion with them, they said that they assumed that they were moderately protected, but when we continued the discussion to the point of, would you be surprised or concerned to find out you had no building code at all, that's when we learned we had identified a real touch point for the consumers that we could work with. And in the work that we do, and many of you do, we realize that we're messaging, we're educating, we're doing outreach. We're trying to get people's attention at a time in our society when everyone else is doing the same thing. And it's really hard to get people's attention on a topic like building codes. But through this survey work and research, what we realized is if we could talk to them about the question of whether or not they had a building code at all, we had their complete attention. Okay, next slide. We asked them in the analysis also, what is the, who is it that you associate with the expectation that you have a building code? And this is very critical because of our work with those thought leaders and decision makers on building codes. And as expected, the public expects builders and local officials to make sure that they have the building codes that they need. And we have a whole strain of the findings around this that talk about the fact that they're not worried about it because they know that these people, if they're behaving responsibly, are taking care of it, quote, taking care of it for them. Next slide. We also looked at a series of questions and dug into the idea of disaster resilience born from building codes against other types of societal questions and concerns. And we kind of put them in context of the other things that people, constituents in local communities typically look at. So crime is the #1, and that's pretty standard. And taxes, property insurance, attracting businesses, protecting the environment, they're all in the mix. But what was very interesting to us is that disaster response and bouncing back, resilience, whatever you want to call it, ranked very highly in kind of benchmarking against these other issues. And I always like to point out that some of this survey came after the initial wave of weather activity in 2017, but some of it preceded it. So I think that as we've taken this information out there and talked to elected officials, one of the things that they've pointed out to us is that this is surprising to them that this ranked so high, but it's also important to them to know this. I'm going to show you guys some of the campaign, but this last research slide, if you want to go to the next one, and I know, again, these are just snapshots of what we learned. Go back one. This is probably the most important finding slide of all, because it helps you understand why we're starting. And this whole effort to make the public understand and aware and value building codes is very early days. This first phase of the work is as simple as helping people understand whether they even have a building code. I want to acknowledge that we know that it's not just the presence of a building code, it has to be a good building code, it has to be an enforced building code, etc. But our challenge is so great that we're just starting with the question of whether or not they have one. And the reason for that is because of this impact value that we got on the statement of 22676. What this is just a maximum differential analysis of statements that we gave to the respondents in the survey, above and below 100. Anything above 100 scores is a viable potential message. Anything below, you probably need to word it differently, right? 22676 is one of the highest impact values that our research partners had ever seen. What that tells us is that the American public is very interested in finding out if they're protected by some type of building code. So next slide. So that's why we created No Code, No Confidence. No Code, No Confidence is the name of the campaign, and this was a tested slogan as well through a series of other additional probing that we did. The idea here is there might be a perfectly well-built home built without a building code, depending on who built it, right? It could be an engineer or an architect, but without a building code, we cannot be confident that your home is well built. And that is what people told us. I want to be confident. I want to know. So we came up with this program called No Code, No Confidence. This is a screen grab of the website, inspecttoprotect.org. You can go to the next slide, where for the first time ever, people can go, put in their address, and in most communities of the United States, they can get a status report on what building codes are used where they live. This is a starting point. Obviously, in the future, we're going to hope to expand it to not just residential, but to commercial. But for starters, we're trying to help people understand what codes are in place today in their community. As far as we can tell, and worked with the national data sets for this, this is the first time this has been done this way. If you go to the next slide, I'll show you how we simplified the analysis for homeowners so that they weren't bombarded with a lot of technical information. We used the age-old, tried and true red, yellow, green analysis. Green is current model codes adopted. Yellow is the code is adopted, but it's out of date. And red is code is not adopted at all. So we basically created a digital solution to get people on a path to understanding if they have a building code. That's great. It's a simple thing to say. It took us a very long time to do because, again, we had to create the data, combine the data, and then put it into a digital interface where they could go to do the lookups. And there's also a crowdsourcing feature here. So every week we'll get a note that says, hey, this is good, but we just changed our building code and made it more current. So there's a way for us to get feedback from the local officials to continuously update the code. And just, we have lots of plans for how to expand this moving in the future. But what I want to finish with is a couple last slides on how we're promoting this beyond the opportunity to do things like give this great webinar today. Next slide. We're partnering with the Flash partnership that I showed you the slides of, the International Code Council. They made No Code, No Confidence the theme of Building Safety Month last year, and we suspect it will be so in the future. We have partnered with the Weather Channel and many of those supporters in the broadcast industry who help us tell the story. So the next two slides, I'm going to show you two of the commercials that are running right now promoting the campaign. So next slide.
Hey, excuse me. What's this?
Oh, we don't really have traffic codes here.
Going without codes doesn't work for traffic safety. It won't work for building safety either. See if your community has a strong building code, or any code at all, at inspecttoprotect.org.
So let's go ahead and show the next one. Good, there you go.
Okay, 10 seconds, jumpers, you ready? Oh, you might want to tug onto your parachutes one last time. We don't inspect them anymore. Shouldn't be a problem, I think. Okay.
You know what this feels like?
Like there's a Category 5 hurricane coming?
And you're trapped somewhere with an outdated building code.
That is crazy.
Cut.
Why would anyone take a leap of faith like that with their home?
Without a building code, you can't be confident your home will protect you in severe weather. No code, no confidence.
Check to see if your community has a strong building code at inspecttoprotect.org.
I'm just glad we didn't do that with a real plane.
Okay, so
Okay.
we'll move to the next slide. There you go. I want to wrap up by apologizing for the technical problems at the top, and I know I moved past our polling question, which if we have a chance to do it at some point is going to be whether or not you're surprised by the research findings that most of America assumes we already have building codes in place. So I want to go ahead and make sure we have that up here, and hopefully I didn't, it was clear enough that you understand it. The other thing I want to do with this final slide is show you where, this is the Cliff Notes version of this project, and there's a lot to it, but the good news is you can go to inspecttoprotect.org and request the toolkit, and you will get a code and a password to explore, download, read, and use any of the vast assets in here. All the commercials are available in different resolutions, optimized for online or even broadcast levels. And there's the paper. A lot of the research slides are in there. We have even more if you want to do a deeper dive into the findings. Katie, I don't know if you can push to that last slide underneath the poll or not. One of the things we've learned, and if you can see on the bottom here, oh, thank you. This is available. This is an open source program. Building codes and getting the word out that you may not have a code at all. And then deep inside that, what John will talk about more, is the quality of the code. This is a message that we have got to share, that we have to help people understand, because right now, unfortunately, most of our country and people and communities across the country are confident, but they may not have any basis to be. They're thinking that the home that they're going to take refuge in a storm, in an earthquake, in a wildfire, other kind of event is going to protect them. And that first and foremost is something that we have to address. Once we help people understand that building codes are unfinished business in the resilience movement, then we can pivot to how we can work together to correct that and create and sustain the transparency that'll move us to a place where building codes are a default and are in place and can routinely be counted on to protect people and property when disasters strike. So I'm going to stop right there and turn it over to John. And again, I'm sorry for the upfront technical stuff, and thanks for your patience with that.
And Leslie.
John, can you hear me?
Oh, John. Well, John's hopping on there and we're transitioning from your slides to John's. Leslie, thank you so much for that portion of the presentation. And Katie did go ahead and put up your first poll question, which for those of you who are not looking at your screens, the question was, are you surprised by the consumer research insights regarding codes that Leslie shared during her presentation? And the results were that 43% of those on the webinar said yes, they were surprised, while 57% said they were not surprised by those results. So Leslie, thank you again. And John, I did just hear your voice, so I think your sound is working. And Katie,
thank you.
Your slides up right now, and over to you.
Thank you so much. And I would just say, let's consider that that poll for a second. The results are meaningful to me because presumably we're a group of like-minded resilience supporting advocates, right? And so it's enlightening to me, it's eye-opening to me that even amongst us, that 43 or so percent is something that is surprising, even to us. So I think that resonates, and that gives us something to think about going forward. But I'm just going to build on what Leslie, and I presume I'm coming through okay, Lori.
Yes, John, you sound really clear on this end. Thank you.
Awesome. I'm going to build on what Leslie shared, and you know, as we recognize what codes provide and what codes have become, really today's building codes are more disaster resistant than ever before. I like to say that today's codes are not your father's building codes, and really. So, you know, why do we have such issues with them not being used? And with these codes being more disaster resistant, let's recognize too that these are not the gold standard. These are not the, you know, super codes or code plus. These are the minimums that the voluntary private sector consensus community has come together and said, these are the minimum building codes to address hazards and risks in different types of construction. So I always like to start there, that sure, to have codes, code plus and higher codes everywhere, that would be a dream, but where are we starting from? So increasing costs of disasters, and we've all seen this, and you know, we can't stop the disasters, but the cost to deal with them continues to rise. And whether it's hurricanes or wildfires, severe storms, and now we have this earthquake in Puerto Rico. Next slide. So who pays for all of this? Well, we know it's tracked back to taxpayers, and if taxpayers are contributing to federal and state efforts to deal with disasters, well, taxpayers are on the hook. But we see there that, you know, despite all of that, the federal spending keeps rising to deal with these rising costs of disasters. Next slide. And as I said, you know, this trickles down from the federal to the state, and how are the states poised to deal with this? Can they handle these disasters and these disruptions? Can they absorb them? All these costs? No. The fiscal pressures come down to our state and local partners, and we see here that those expenditures continue to rise. Next slide. What I want to talk next about, what are some new tools, resources, and solutions that the federal government, in particular FEMA, are putting in place to help reduce future costs, and the sweeping reform of the DRA is going to help there. There's a couple of them that are related to building codes that I want to focus on. And if I could just pause here, let's consider, following on the first polling question, let's kind of level set here. And let me ask you this question, and help us with this question too in the poll. Do you know the building code where you live? Just a basic question, you know, where you live, or maybe it's where you work. You know, can you, maybe you don't have the code or can't cite it by verse, but is it a recent code? Is it complete? Are the provisions intact? Has any changed or amended out? You know, pause for a minute and think about your situation and help us answer this question. So while we wait for, okay, look at this. having some results here. Is this the same percentage we had before? Wow, that's consistency. I hand it to you all. Look at this. Yes, 43%. No, 57%. And there again, it's telling, but in the reverse. Here we are, a group of folks like-minded, seeing the benefits of mitigation in all forms and ways that it's going to accomplish. And of course, building codes are part of that. And yet, more than half of us don't know what we're starting from, where we live, what the codes are in our own community. So this is good validation for Leslie's campaign and also what we're doing. Okay, good. Next slide. So just a few aspects of DRA that are really going to change how we provide assistance and provide assistance in new ways that have never been done before. What happens when we have a disaster? The first thing is realizing, some entity has to deal with all of a sudden all these damaged non-conforming buildings. Who does that? And can they handle it on their own? Was their department themselves, right, we'll stay on this slide, goal one, but the staff that they have, if they have staff, can they handle it? Well, we've seen time and time again, they're overwhelmed. So DRA section 1206 is specifically designed the moment that disaster occurs, that if the community has a plan in place, it's always best to make plans, but that they can carry out that plan with assistance right away to for building code and floodplain management administration and enforcement. That's huge, and so that whatever they need to do, they need to do temporary hires or surge staff or get help from their neighboring jurisdictions or maybe from state to state through EMAC. It's not a question of is this eligible or reimbursed. Congress has made it very clear in 1206 that it is, and it makes this assistance available for the surge capacity and to provide that for up to 180 days. So if you've heard about this, great. If some of the folks that we talked, actually everyone that took that poll question, you can think about that and think who is your local government building department. Do they know about this provision? And do they have a plan in place to utilize it? Because last thing we want to do is try to figure out how to get this assistance in the heat of disaster. DRA section 1234 is really also a game changer. The notion that pre-disaster mitigation, now in this new moniker, Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities, BRIC, that in addition to bricks and mortar, and we can see the benefit of actual mitigation projects, that mitigation processes like implementing building codes, well, that is actually an eligible activity, and that can be pursued pre-disaster, and that's actually the best time to do this. To take a look at what codes you have. Are they old? Are they out of date? What is the effectiveness of the enforcement? What is the qualifications and training and certification of the staff? How they outreach and disseminate information on codes. Well, now all of a sudden, these kind of things are eligible project. I'm a former building official, so I'm super excited about all this. So here we are for the first time to see this. And also, as I'm sharing this, reach out to your counterparts. And then, do they know about this? And do they need this kind of help? And are they planning are they planning to apply for it? I mean, we are in 2020, and this year, we are going to see later this year a notice of funding opportunity for this BRIC program, and applications will be the application period will be open. And so, you know, what does your project look like? Are you ready for this? Now, all of these guidance is being developed, and there's going to be additional dissemination and outreach and dialogue and webinars. But my message to you is don't wait, because all of your planning efforts will pay off when the time comes for getting this help. DRA Section 1235B, consensus-based codes and standards, kind of carries on from work that FEMA did in 2016 with the Building Codes Directive and the Public Assistance Minimum Standards policy, to say that no longer would we look to deliver public assistance funding, reimbursing for repair, reconstruction of eligible buildings to whatever code the community had in place prior to disaster. Because we know that model doesn't work, especially if there's no codes or inferior codes and the taxpayers' funds are not widely used. So this law puts into law, you know, something that we've had in policy, but just to say it doesn't matter what code or standard the jurisdiction or has for that eligible project. The latest published editions of these consensus codes and standards are going to be used in that facility. And this last one, 1241, provides, Congress said, provide guidance for post-disaster building safety assessment, because that's a critical thing. As I mentioned in 1206, how do you deal with all these buildings? You know, what method of inspection, what safety assessments do you do? How do we document and organize teams? And most importantly, how do we go from, you know, trying to get a bunch of volunteers, but actually getting professionals to apply these guidelines and then get reimbursed for doing it? So 1241 has just resulted in a FEMA publication 2055, which provides this guidance. So I highly recommend looking at the guidance and seeing what's in there. Next slide. So in addition to what Congress is telling us and what FEMA is putting in policy, different groups have been active in looking at the benefits of mitigation. We know the seminal work done by the National Institute of Building Sciences, the Mitigation Saves studies, and how in 2016 those were updated and validated, things such as the findings such as federal mitigation grants save $6 per $1 spent, increase from 4 to 1 previously. But look at some of these other things as these studies and these yearly interim updates with other studies kind of amplify. Exceeding codes saves $4 per $1 spent. Adopting model codes saves $11 per $1 spent, compared to 1990 era codes and things like the minimum FIP. So these studies kind of give the data and give the results of what we know intuitively. So that helps a great deal. Next slide. One of the projects that look forward to in 2020 this spring is a culmination of 10 years of work, really, and we call it the Building Code Saves project. And really, this is going to show for the first time nationwide the losses avoided that could be attributed to the adoption and enforcement of modern building codes since the first unified model code came into existence in 2000. what has happened over the last 20 years with construction, with codes, with development. This monumental study is pulling millions and millions of parcel data, building construction data from CoreLogic and other sources, and then putting it through catastrophic modeling and hazardous analysis, and then producing these losses avoided that could be attributed. And think about it as something that's going to have something for everybody, and there'll be data and results from a national perspective, but then there'll be results that can be looked at regionally, state, and even potentially at the local jurisdiction. We're looking after this report is released to kind of deliver some of the data and results through some type of online web platform. So this is very exciting to come, and some of this will help in some of these efforts to prop up or to defend building codes so that they're not weakened and that they can be adopted and enforced. So looking forward to that. Next slide. Another big thing you may have heard about is what's happening in the National Flood Insurance Program and really overhauling the way risk is insurance rates are determined in underwriting. This could be a whole nother presentation, but we call it Risk Rating 2.0. And really it's going to think about it as what Leslie was sharing. People can put their address in and find out basic information. Do I have a code or not? This is actually going to create an individualized picture of a property's risk. And so it's going to move beyond things like lines on a map and flood zones and the old way of assessing flood risk and establishing rates. It's going to be very personalized. Bring it to the structure, to that structure. It's its replacement cost, its type of construction, its proximity to a flood source. It's even going to consider, not just riverine and coastal, but fluvial flooding, which contributes more and more to flood disasters. So it's going to be a better picture of the risk and a better picture of what it means for individual property. But think about the building codes. In some sense, this is going to help to validate or to emphasize that if this is what's going to guide risk and development, we need to have modern codes, up-to-date flood codes and standards in place, and not rely on the minimum NFIP standards created in 1968, as state of the art as they were then. They've far been exceeded. Next slide. So what does this all mean? If I had to paint a picture for you, and considering what we heard from Leslie and what I've shared here, what's our starting point? And thinking about the poll that you just took, look at this. This is what we track on a quarterly basis of what we consider the adoption of hazard-resistant building codes. And so using data that we have and from the Insurance Services Office through their BSEGS program, we're able to know across something like 25,000 jurisdictions what edition of the building code do they have, number one. Number two, have they weakened, deleted any of the natural hazard provisions? And if they have the two most recent editions and they haven't weakened the code, they get a check. They get a check and they get indicated by the color green. And so, look, does it surprise you the amount of green on this map? Or the lack of the amount of green on this map. It surprises a lot of people. And remember, again, I'm not talking about super codes or code plus, I'm talking about very, very minimum. The bare minimum, the consensus community has come together and said, this is what needs to be in place. So this represents about, the green represents about 37% of the jurisdictions in the US exposed to one or more of these hazards, like I mentioned, earthquake, flood, hurricane, even inland wind and tornado. If they have one or more of these hazards and they're not using a disaster risk code, they are tan. And look at all the tan in this map. And think about the poll question and think about where you are in this map. Are you green or are you tan? So we track this on a quarterly basis, and we do see the trends where the adoption percentage rises modestly, in small increments over time. But don't you think we can do better? And can we use the tools that we have, that we mentioned, the campaign on the toolkit that Leslie mentioned, to put some of this awareness into consumers' hands, and even just having them show up at city council or county commission meetings, or a building code is going to be decided. Just think of what the voice of consumers can do to advance building codes, because ultimately these decisions are made by elected leaders, and if the constituents are not speaking up, then they just go by information they have. So hopefully I've painted a picture here to give you the sense of what things look like, and really for me it's a call to action. And I think that we'd like to share this with you. We'd like to partner with you. I think we have one more poll question to see if any of this prompts any ideas or suggestions or just general enthusiasm. We'd like to work with you to advance codes here, like the question, through partnership. So would you like to work with us? So I think we will tally these results, and we'll have a way to contact you as a follow-up. So while you're finishing that, I think I have my last slide there for this. Oh, okay, just next to last slide. So just to point out, we don't just do building codes, we do building performance assessments, we provide design and construction guidance. Here's coming attractions this year, things to look for. Actually, some of this has already been released from last fall. And we support all of this with training in our courses, pre-disaster, post-disaster. Next slide. Okay, and then I think that as a takeaway, a lot of what I covered is put together in a handy one-pager, and that's a takeaway for you to point you towards these different programs. But also, I'll mention that with this renewed focus and attention on codes, FEMA has also done another thing. We have decided that as an agency, we really, because we have different programs and different initiatives and different activities with the public, we really need to come together and have an agency strategy dealing with building codes and dealing with policy and issues and opportunities, and just a strategy, a building code strategy for the agency. So you'll be happy to learn that we've launched that effort the end of last year, and sometime this fall, in September, we hope to release what we call the FEMA building codes strategy, an agency strategy for advancement of building codes and advancement of adoption and enforcement of building codes. This will be a first step if we hope to go beyond an agency strategy and do something amongst the federal family. And then if we're ambitious and successful there, something that looks like a national strategy. So more to come. hope we've piqued your interest and you're excited as I am. I really appreciate the time. So, hey, how did we do on that last poll question?
Katie, I thank you, John. Katie, did you, I didn't, oh, there it is. Can you share the third poll question, Katie? I'm seeing the response to the first. I'm not sure. So
Okay.
John and Leslie, while we are working through that, oh, here's the answer. So 9 out of 10, John. So the question was, wait, and 9 out of 10, yes, I should say. So would you like to work together to advance building codes through partnership?
Oh, I love it.
And Flash? And 90% of the participants who responded said yes, while 10% said no. So, but they were just, you know, so yeah, that was the answer. And
Wonderful.
yes, so thank you, and thank you to everyone out there. Leslie and John, I wanted to check in with you. We have just about 2 minutes for Q&A, and then the last 2 minutes we'll need to wrap up. So what we're going to do for all the participants who are on the phone, we can see your questions coming in via the chat and the Q&A, and we are so thankful for that. We will compile your questions, and then we will put up written responses from John and Leslie. But since we do have a couple of minutes, I'll start with one. Leslie's been kind of answering where she can, but I'll start with one of the questions here for Leslie, which was, the question was from April. Oftentimes we don't have the political support to revise deficient codes. What strategies do you recommend for getting the political support and will that we need to amend our codes or to enhance them? So Leslie and or John, what comments on that good question do you have?
I will tell you that the most compelling, you'd be so surprised to learn that that simple photo that I got from our partners at FEMA has helped really open a lot of eyes. Just seeing the comparison really has opened a lot of eyes for decision makers, leaders, and others who impact the code's, you know, acceptance or rejection. And I think our partners at IBHS provide great comparison videos on certain types of practices up or down. We've all seen those videos, but anything we can do that shows success and failure benchmarked together seems to really get it done. The cost information, the NIB study John talked about, the losses avoided study that FEMA has ongoing, all these make the economic case, which is what the next step is. After we get their attention with the fact that this is an issue, and we can come in behind and make the economic case. Both of those will really help and really do help advance code adoption and acceptance.
And I would just add, take a look at FEMA's National Advisory Council 2009 recommendations report published at the end of last year. And yes, there'll always be political opposition, but if this is coming from SLTTs, this group, which is comprised of SLTs, they have spoken and they have given recommendations to the FEMA administrator. Hey, building codes are not what they need to be in this country, and we need to use them to a great extent. And so they made 4 specific recommendations to help with education, with partnerships, to come up with self-assessment tools, and also to update the minimum standards in FIP. So if there's opposition, you know, at least there's another group that is more in tune with the voice of SLTT leadership, and you can share that with them. Look for the NAC report, share that around, because hopefully these opposition voices, they become more the exception than the rule. But thank you.
Thank you, John and Leslie, and to all the participants out there, just so you know, again, we will compile the questions and responses and also the slides as well as the handout that John shared today. We will post all of those on Leslie and John's presentation page under the Making Mitigation Work webinar tab on the Hazard Center website. And so in closing today, just John and Leslie, thank you so much for this presentation. Thank you for the work that you are doing. It is clear that there is much work to be done in this space, and also it's clear that you are helping to light a path forward. Bringing this to a close, in addition to thanking you, we want to also thank all of the participants who stayed on the line today, and thank FEMA and the National Science Foundation for the support to make this series possible. To all of those who hope to receive credit for attending the webinar, please contact Katie Murphy. Her email is on the slides right now and also on our website to receive your certificate of attendance. And then next slide, please, Katie. And then we would like to also invite all of you to join us again next month for our February webinar, which will be February 11th from 1 to 2 p.m. Eastern. Professor Sarah Graneski from the University of Utah will be joining with us to highlight how mitigation activities helped Houston households who were affected in Hurricane Harvey. You can find more updates about that webinar and future webinars at hazards.colorado.edu. Again, a final warm thanks to John and Leslie for sharing your insights and knowledge with us today. On behalf of everyone here at the Natural Hazard Center, we hope to see you all again next month. Please take care of yourself and others.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Happy New Year, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.